Wowski Reads, and if you've been here for a while you will know that I do a monthly reading Scottish wrap up, and that's what I'm going to do today. As always, if you have any recommendations for Scottish fiction or non-fiction, I would love to hear it, because my TBR list is ever growing and I think I quite like that. Usually I get through 4 books, but this month I got through 5 because I read a non-fiction. And now I'm feeling a little bit like an overachiever, but here we are. So I suppose I'll just go from fiction to non-fiction. And first up is Conviction by Denise Mina. I thought that this was my first full-length Denise Mina novel because I had read Rizzio a couple of months ago. Or was it last month? I don't know. What is time? But it turns out I have read another book, full-length novel, by Denise Mina before, and I loved that. So I was quite excited. So this book is all about a woman with a secret hidden past, and it all comes out. Then she finds herself investigating the death of a friend, and all of her skeletons come out of the closet, and it's basically a thriller that takes us across part of mainland Europe. It was pretty exciting as a concept. I really enjoyed the beginning of this. It felt so exciting and I felt like I was instantly thrown into the drama and the chaos. But then it felt like too much happened and yet nothing happened at the same time. There was so much information and so many things going on, but they weren't overly important to the story. Or they were. It's just, it felt like the middle just tried to give me far too much information. It was information overload in the middle, and I felt like that really could have just been reduced and compacted a bit. The ending, I really enjoyed the ending, but I saw the twist coming. It felt quite obvious. Originally I was giving this book a 3, but there was part of this book that annoyed me, so I marked it down to a 2. And the reason that this annoyed me was that there was a character, Finn, and he was only given one personality trait, really, and his personality trait was related to his eating disorder. And that just didn't sit right with me, and I wasn't okay with that. So I rounded it down to a 2, which is probably more of a 2.5, because it was a fine book. It just felt like so much happened in the middle 40%, which it just felt like too much, and it was completely unbelievable, but it was all right. Moving on to Circus of Wonders by Elizabeth Macneal. This is one of the books on my 22 in 2022, so I'm feeling really good about getting this one read. And I have read this author before and I really enjoyed her previous book of The Doll Factory. This book was all about Nell, who was a young woman who had birthmarks all over her body, and her father sold her to the circus. And it was basically all about her sort of learning to love what made her different and kind of embrace her differences. And it was really nice seeing her character growth, and she made friends. I absolutely loved her friendship with the other women who were also part of the circus. I thought that was really great. I really enjoyed that this book was told in 3 different narratives. There was Nell, who was the woman who was sold to the circus. There was Jasper, who was the circus master, and he was creepy. He was so creepy. And there was Toby, who was his brother. Toby was also creepy. And what I love about Elizabeth Macneal is that she writes a really good creepy male character who doesn't seem creepy at the beginning. And then when you look back, you realise the signs were there. He was a creeper. And I enjoyed that. I really liked that this book also had some flashbacks to the Crimean War. So we got some backstory to Toby and Jasper and their relationship, because their relationship was just so strange for brothers who, you know, work together. You would expect them to get on better, and I thought that was really good at giving me a little bit more of a backstory. I found this book just so, it was heartbreaking in parts, obviously with the subject matter. It showed Jasper for being the horrific human being that he was. You know, a showman who made money off of people that he bought. And while you know, he paid them, he still bought them as if they weren't humans. And that was just horrific. This book felt like it really sensitively handled things that happened in real life. You know, showmen did purchase people as acts, and they treated the people and the animals horrifically. And this book reflected that. It didn't glamorise it in any way. I really enjoyed seeing Nell just sort of grow into the star that she was and just embrace herself and embrace her friendships. It was such a dark story, and then I got some hope, which is what I love. And this author usually does that. She makes me feel so sad and, you know, breaks my wee heart and then leaves me feeling hopeful. And that's what I enjoyed. I gave this book 4 stars. I really did like it. Another author that I've read and enjoyed before is Kirsty Logan. And the next book is The Sound at the End by Kirsty Logan. This book was a little bit different because it was an audiobook, but I think it only exists in audio format because I don't think it would work as a physical book. So this book takes place in the Arctic, and there's a skeleton crew that are up there and they are diving in order to explore a shipwreck. And it's the Arctic, so it's super remote. There's hardly anybody there, and people start to experience some unusual activity amongst themselves, and secrets start coming out. All the while, there was a doctor called Mal who basically took it upon herself to be the therapist, because the therapist who should be there to keep everyone safe, because sometimes the old brain does not react well to being in remote circumstances, but she decided she would do it. And I hated her. I hated Mal so much. She was not a licensed therapist. She had no business doing that. And she had decided that she wanted to just break people to rebuild them, which was instant red flags. No, Mal, that's not what therapy is. So I absolutely hated her. But I really enjoyed that I didn't like any of the characters in this book, which I don't need to enjoy the characters, but it does help. The main character was Trieste, who I hated Trieste. I would not want to work with her. She was awful. She was the kind of colleague that just decides that they instantly have to know all of your secrets, everything. And you're like, Trieste, you've been here for a week. Perhaps we can have some secrets. Maybe they'll be revealed later, but for now, our relationship is very new. But no, she wouldn't take that for an answer. And people kept telling her to go away. And I loved that people would be yelling at her to leave, swearing at her, and she would just be like, I'll come back later. You know, completely oblivious to the fact that nobody wanted her nosing about. And I hated her too, but I really enjoyed her character, if that makes sense, because it made for a really interesting story. The reason why I don't think this would work so well as a non-audiobook was because it was a truly sort of immersive audio experience. There were recordings of therapy sessions, of dives, but sometimes they were distorted, and sometimes some people heard things that others heard different things, and it was so creepy. I really enjoyed it. Turns out I like a creepy book, and I really enjoyed that you could sort of see the slow descent into chaos. And, you know, I really liked trying to work out, were these things actually happening, or were they happening in Trieste's mind? And also, what on earth was going on? I really enjoyed this. And it's such a good example of how I can hate everybody in a book, but if the plot is there, I can still come away absolutely loving it. And I did really love this book. But I don't want to work with anybody who insists on knowing my secrets after 1 week. I mean, I like to keep my secrets to myself. I don't think I have any secrets, but if I did, I would keep them to myself because they're mine. Next up is one of my newest books, which is Nothing Left Unsaid by Janey Godley. This was a pre-order, and in order to prevent a repeat of last year, I'm trying to read my pre-orders as I get them. So this book is all about a woman called Sharon who returns back to her hometown of Glasgow because her mother is dying. And her mum, Senga, tells her to find her old diary and instructs her to read it. And we go on a sort of dual narrative adventure between current day and the 1970s with the diary entries. I don't know how well known Janey Godley is outside of Scotland. I know that in Scotland she's very popular. She is a comedian, so I associate her with comedy and making me chuckle, and I don't know if that's something that other people would know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But this book was, if I didn't know that this book was written by Janey Godley, I would have been able to tell that from reading it, because it just oozes her sort of way of speaking. I have watched a lot of her voiceovers, as have so many other people, especially during lockdown, and they're just so funny, and this book is full of moments like that. A lot of the diary entries were just so funny, but it also was full of heart, so you could really see that Senga had really worked hard to raise her 3 children and, you know, put herself last so that they could, you know, go on school trips and sort of get the best that she could give them. I loved her friendship with her friends. They were characters that were familiar from Janey Godley's voiceovers, you know, with Isa Macneal, all the Sandras. I really enjoyed those little callbacks. Obviously, if you weren't aware of the author's comedy, you would still get a lot out of this, but the book also covered some dark elements which were prevalent for women in the 70s and, you know, still today. So it included things like domestic violence, and because of Senga's health failing, Sharon is tasked with finding the old gang from the diary, and I really enjoyed sort of having everybody come back to see Senga and sort of have that last goodbye. There was also a secret, which I really enjoyed the sort of slow reveal of that secret, and I felt like the diary entries really helped Sharon to sort of heal from her broken marriage by seeing how strong her mother and her mother's friends had been with the things that they had faced. While this book did include some really tough subjects, it was filled with so much laughter and so much love, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars because I've recently joined StoryGraph and now I'm loving having half stars. But I think I can't remember if I gave it 4 or 5 on Goodreads because I have to round. But I really enjoyed this book. It was the first Janey Godley novel that I have read, and I would definitely read another one. Made me chuckle, it was light, made me feel, made me cry. But I mean, everything makes me cry. And the last book I read is non-fiction called Single Taken Cursed by Nikki Bell. I received this book as an ebook. The author reached out to me on social media and asked if I wanted to read her book, and I said yes please. So that's how I got this book. And this is a really short book about the worst dates that this author has been on, and I absolutely love reading stories about disastrous dates. You know, disastrous dates where nobody gets hurt. Low stakes of disaster is what I enjoy. Basically, give me a book that is the problem page of a teenage magazine from the early 2000s and I am in, and that's what I feel I got with this book. I found it to be absolutely hilarious, and the author and I are about a year apart, so there were lots of nostalgic references like Bebo, MSN Messenger, teletext holidays that just, you know, tickled me because I love that sort of bit of late 90s, early 2000s nostalgia. It really does something for me. Saying that, I think people might have not been early 2000s because I know I was at uni, but aughties. I really like having something that gives me that flashback to my own time where I was sort of learning how to be a human, basically. This basically was just like chatting to a friend about the disastrous dates that she'd been on, which is something that I did in my teens and my 20s and some of my 30s, and still now. When my friends go on disastrous dates, I like to hear about them. So yeah, it was nice getting a non-fiction in for a change. I don't remember the last Scottish non-fiction that I read, so that's something I need to remember for next time and focus on reading more of that. I gave this the full 5 stars because I laughed so hard and I bulked. There were points that I was like, oh, that's disgusting, and but it was so funny, and I finished it in an evening. I didn't mean to finish it in an evening. I meant to just dip in, read a chapter, maybe 2, and then go back to my other book. But I didn't. I read this and I regret nothing. So those are my books that I read for my Scottish reading experience this month. I'm coming out of it feeling good because I had 5 books and 4 of them were 4 stars and up. Not too shabby. I have no idea what I'm reading next month. Apart from I do have a book I have to read for the Scottish Book Club, which is Happiness is Wasted on Me. So I will be reading that. That's definitely going to be getting talked about next month. Other than that, I have no idea. If you've read any of these, do let me know how you got on with them, because I love seeing how my ratings compare to other people. Sometimes I'm too free and easy with the stars and I just throw them about, but I feel that these were all deserved. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!